I'm here with Goose today. They them pronouns, if I'm correct.
Yep.
We have met each other before in CC.
Yes,
Um,
we have.
we had a very fun time together with all the other people as well. We talked about snake guns, nothing that much important. Uh, um, but they are here today with us, so we can know more about what it's like being transgender, being non-binary. Like get more information for ourselves, for myself as well, because I've never really talked about in depth with someone about this. So I'm very glad you're on here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here. I love talking about it, so.
Yeah, let's get straight into it. Um, what has been your experience with gender?
So I am agender, which is on the non-binary spectrum. Basically means either a lack of gender or some people use it to mean gender neutral. For me, it is the lack of gender. I don't feel like my body connects to any sort of gender identity, um, which is very difficult to explain what that actually means. And that's probably like the hardest thing you're asked when you are non-binary is what does that feel like? How do you explain that? It's very difficult to do it in cis terms. And just to keep on top of terms here, cis, when I say cis, I mean cisgender, which means
Mm-hmm.
you are not transgender. You are what you identified with at birth. And non-binary and binary genders, the binary genders are male, female. The non-binary is everything else, pretty much. So you may hear of people who are, for example, demi boys or demi girls or gender fluid. That's all on the non-binary spectrum. Agender, people put it on the non-binary spectrum. You can also consider it outside of both, because it's a lack of. It's kind of people place it where they feel it's right for them, type thing. Um, so it's very interesting for me personally being agender because it is like my body does not connect to my mental identity and my expression of myself, which means that for me, unlike other trans people, I don't get dysphoria or dysmorphia. So my body for me doesn't feel wrong necessarily. Um, I just kind of vibe. It's definitely a vibe. So when it comes to things like um surgery or hormones that a lot of other trans people might want to go for, that's not something I personally would go for.
That's
And
that's not something you can relate. You don't have a body dysphoria or a gender dysphoria. It's more of like a um, I don't know. You don't really feel. I don't want to put words in your mouth, of course. Um, would you say it's more like you don't really identify as a boy or a girl? Like you don't really like the characteristics these groups have, or how should I view it more?
so yeah, I don't identify as male, female, or anything in between. Um, Day to day, I don't go between the two. I don't get close to one or the other. Like, for example, a gender fluid person might. I just don't feel any connection to either gender or any gender at all. Um, which is sort of like it's not necessarily the characteristics that a gender has, because part of your characteristics you could describe as, for example, masculinity and femininity. And as we know from looking at real world examples, you can have a very feminine man who is still a man and a very masculine woman who is still a woman. So my masculinity and femininity does vary. um that's just how I'm feeling on a day. I think that's applicable to most people. um but in terms of gender identity, yeah, it's hard to describe how you pinpoint that feeling in cis terms, but it's a distinct lack thereof. For example, if you were to use she, her pronouns on me or
Mm-hmm.
he, him pronouns on me, they would both have the same effect, which is that it feels wrong. Like it feels like being called by the wrong name. It feels like um, if someone touches you in a spot that's a bit tickly, and like get off type thing. It's
Yeah.
a discomfort. It's a discomfort where you feel it goes against who you are.
All
A
right.
similar feeling actually to when you see something immoral or that goes against your values. It's that sort of discomfort.
Yeah, it's like it's like you something you see don't really like. You know, it's like you see a dead bird on the street. You think like pretty
So,
disgusting, but yeah, I'm just gonna ride on by. Uh,
yes,
um.
yeah.
So when did you figure this out? Like, was it from a young age? Like how did you go through the process of identifying as non-binary?
I always sort of felt this way, but I had no way to articulate it. And this is a story with both my coming out of gender and sexuality, is that I always felt it. I just didn't know what the word was for it because we're not really taught it. I live in the UK. Sex education here does not spread to LGBT issues nearly as much as it should do. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, the most recent step forward in LGBT issues for sex education was literally that you have to mention them as examples. You don't have to go into their issues, but you have to like mention that they exist. So really not comprehensive whatsoever. Um, and so when I went to sixth form, which is the education you move into when you're 16 here, I met somebody who was non-binary. They described to me what to them non-binary was, which they give a very simple description of I don't feel like a girl or a boy. And I was like, huh, that's what I feel. I
And
didn't know
these,
that that was an option.
I'm sorry, and these classes did not capture that. Like,
No.
that's pretty weird. Like, was it a separate class, like sexual education, or was it more? Because when I was in high school, I used to get it in with like biology. So then you'd have biology, and then in this biology class, you learn all about like periods and like genitalia and that sort of thing. But you had a separate class called sex ed, and this weren't mentioned.
So we had biology as well, but that, like you mentioned there, it only covered the cis experience, the biological, or rather the physical experience of, menstruation and reproduction. We had a separate class. Some places would call it life studies. Some people would call it gosh, I don't know. There was lots of different names for it, and we did have sex education within that class. So the first sex education that you get here would be, as far as I remember it, probably in primary school. You get sort of like the puberty talk, and then when you get into secondary school here, which is 11 to 16, it goes more into, sexual health, STIs, pregnancy, and that sort of thing. And then when you get into sixth form or college, which is 16 to 18 education here, the sex education focus more around relationships, healthy relationships, the emotional side, as well as the physical side of sex education. But at no point was gender mentioned to me. At no point was sexuality actually heavily mentioned to me, other than pointing out the rates of HIV in the gay community, which I don't know the stats on specifically myself, but I don't think it's the most important thing they could have mentioned when, for the LGBT community, you have higher rates of mental health issues, higher rates of sexual abuse, higher rates of bullying, and all these awful things, especially in educational settings. And it seems very much overlooked.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if you only have had like more of the physical attributes or the more of the physical characteristics, and not really about like all these other genders or how society looks upon them. I think that's a little bit troubling. I think there needs to be more attention to it if this is the case.
Yeah, yeah,
You
definitely.
you have a pretty conservative government right now, right?
Yes, the Tories are in, unfortunately.
Uh, I want to sort of sidestep this, um, just for a brief moment. Um, Currently, like in the U.S., there are also like the "Don't Say Gay" bills. Have there been any sort of comparable examples in the UK, or is that still a thing that's not happening yet?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I think I did read something, but definitely nothing to the extent as what is going on in America, luckily. There is, on the sex education, it is very slow moving. That's something that I was looking at a while ago, but um, in terms of oppressive laws, I'm not entirely sure. I know that access to gender affirming surgeries and gender affirming treatments, so that would be like your hormones and your your hysterectomies and that sort of thing. Um, the access to that is a lot harder if you're doing it for a trans reason. So the process is that you have to go to a gender specialist, a gender clinic, and they have to sort of sign you off. You have to have proof that you've lived at this as this gender for, I think it's, I'm not sure exactly how long it is. You have to be of a certain age and all these things.
I thought in the US it was 2 years or 6 months. I
Yeah,
thought, yeah.
it's 2 years for a name change here. I'm not sure how long it is for surgeries. Um, but
But you've never considered transitioning? Well, I assume. Because so are there people who transition if they're non-binary? Like I can imagine that if you don't really have gender dysphoria, or if you don't identify as either genders, that transitioning wouldn't be really useful. Uh, you've never
yeah,
had that experience.
this is very interesting to me because I have a friend who is the same gender identity as me. They are also agender, and they have lots of dysphoria. They will be getting a lot of surgeries. So the experience of non-binary people really is very individual. Um, it means you kind of have to be careful about what you assume in non-binary people because it is such like a large spectrum. It's when you say non-binary, I think it's really reductive to the actual size, or rather the range of experiences that it covers. So my friend, for example, will be getting a full hysterectomy, will not be able to reproduce after that, um, will get their menstrual cycle stopped, hopefully permanently, will have top surgery, and they will do all that. And I'm not sure exactly of their experience of dysphoria. I don't know like where it comes from, what sources related to their gender. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't personally ask them because it's a very distressing thing to think about. You basically feel disgusted in your own skin. I have experienced dysphoria before, not related to gender. Um, and I can say it's an awful, awful feeling that nobody should have to go through.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Thankfully.
Hmm.
Um.
For
Uh.
me, yeah, no surgery for me. For me, my ideal body would literally be to be able to change depending on who. Can I be explicit? Can I be what rude words can I use?
It's Twitch, so I don't know how 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 much of the bad words you can use, or like how explicit you can be. Uh,
Okay.
I don't think I will get cancelled because I have like maybe one sub, but please go ahead.
For me, I would change my body depending on who I am intimate with at the time. So because I'm bisexual, if I wanted to be intimate with um someone with female genitalia, then I would want to have the opposite, or whatever like feels best. To me, like my body, because it's separate from my gender and my identity, is very much more like just a sex organ to me. Um, which is definitely not something that I want you to generalize to all non-binary people.
No,
I have
no,
a
of course,
very
of course.
unique experience. I actually have an experience that a lot of the trans community is afraid of showing because there is a lot of stigma around trans people, around saying, oh well, it comes from trauma, it's because you're messed up, you have like weird views of sex or something like that, or you didn't have like a father figure or something like that. And I personally have a lot of sexual trauma, and that does impact how I view myself and how I view like my sexual relationships. And to be honest, that affects me more than my gender. But I would like to stress that they're very separate things, and they're very easy for me personally to distinguish between because the feeling is completely different. Um, and so it's kind of, when I talk about this stuff, I'm always a little bit worried that somebody is going to spring the question on me like, oh well, maybe you're just traumatized, maybe you just need to go to therapy.
Yeah, I
But
think
this is,
that's ridiculous.
yeah, it's not something that needs to be fixed. It doesn't cause me any harm to be agender. And there's nothing wrong with people who are trans who have dysphoria. That's not something that necessarily needs to be fixed in the sense that I think something that I read recently that I really liked was that a compliment that people often give trans people is that you can't tell you're trans, you pass so well. But this sets up the idea that being cisgender is the aim and being cisgender is the superior state, which for trans people, a lot of trans people don't necessarily want to be cisgender. They want to be gender affirmed, they want to be comfortable in their body, but being transitioned isn't the same as them wanting to be cisgender, and it can actually be quite upsetting for people to say to them. You know, it's like to give a comparison, it's like if you say to a disabled person, "Oh, you can't tell that you're disabled." It's sort of invalidating their identity and their right to exist at the same value as the alternative.
Well, I may be ignorant on this subject, but isn't for some people the goal of transitioning to pass as a cisgender person? I mean, that's the entire idea of transitioning, right? To be able, or at least that has always been my view of it, that you are able to pass as cisgender, so all so the body dysphoria or the gender dysphoria won't be there anymore. You know, you have passed, you have succeeded. I know this is a bit of a side, but I'm autistic. Um, Therefore, social interactions are quite difficult. But if I am able to pass as if I'm not autistic, I feel like then I have achieved uh, um, being neurotypical. Then I have achieved, or at least mimicking neuro, normal people, right? Um,
And
hmm?
in a sense, like the question that I would ask is that good? Is that healthy? Is that what we should be setting up as the goal? I have ADHD. Would I want to be told by people, "Oh, you don't seem ADHD, like you seem normal"? Definitely not. And this is the thing, some trans people do want to pass as cis. It's something that some of them want. But I think there is you have to distinguish between wanting to pass to yourself, wanting to feel affirmed in that gender, wanting to feel the gender that you identify as in your physical expression, and wanting other people to view you as cis. There's definitely a difference between the two things. Some people want to pass, as in they want other people to see them as the gender that they are. I mean, of course, everybody wants to be seen as the gender that they are, but um, whether to, I think to pass as cis for the aim to be cis, it sort of runs the double edge there of also um sort of forgetting to acknowledge the transition itself and the struggle that you went through. A transition as an aim is not the same as being cis as an aim because a transition is such a massive thing for a lot of trans people. It's a journey, it's a difficult journey, it's incredibly stressful. All of the you're basically fighting for medical professionals to acknowledge you and change your life for the better in ways that cis people never would have to, in ways that people with other conditions would never have to.
Well, then isn't it? Well, then if they are fighting for the recognition that they are that gender, um, then I think that surgery, of course, would help. But if they are then after surgery being recognized as the gender they identify as, isn't then the goal achieved for them?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that there's a difference between being recognized as the gender you are and passing as cis. There's a difference between being recognized
Ah,
for your
okay.
transition, recognized for your journey, recognized for your identity as a trans person,
Yeah, you're right. I
and being
recognize the difference.
told, yeah,
Yeah,
be- being told you seem cis, like good for you.
yeah. It's not like yeah. I get it. There's a fundamental distinction between saying, "Hey, you're transgender, but you look cis," or people thinking or people recognizing that you are that gender. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that.
yeah.
All right. Um, there's another question I have, which has boggled my mind. Um, how now I'm not really familiar with trans community. Um, like how does it relate to sexuality? Because um, what if you are like if you're a cis guy and you're straight, then you're attracted to women. But then if you are a trans woman, like then you would still be attracted to women. I I don't know. Like sexuality doesn't change if you change genders, right?
Yeah, so who you're attracted to doesn't change. For most people, sometimes along the journey, they might realize, oh, I actually like this person, these people more, or whatever. But being transgender does not change, and it does not cause change. However, they would label themselves differently a lot of the time. It depends on how you define sexuality. Some people do it by gender, some people do it by sex, as in like being attracted to people with a certain genitalia or being attracted to a gender identity. So, for example, my trans lady friend upstairs, she um, before she came out as female, um, she liked other women, or rather, while she was presenting as sorry, very difficult to like word it all. When she
I get
was
it.
when she was not out yet, she was attracted to women, and so she was straight. And then she came out as female, and she was still attracted to women, so now she identifies as lesbian. So the label they'll use will change because it's about um your gender in relation to other genders, but fundamentally who you're attracted to doesn't change.
Okay, gotcha. It's just like the definition change. Yeah, so the identification changed based on if your gender changes. All right, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you're bisexual. Does that have any influence at all? Probably not. Like you can hang around with guys and girls,
Yeah,
non-binary people.
yeah. I am attracted to anybody and everybody. I'm bisexual because I have preference.
All right. Would you be technically pan? Like I get that most people know bisexuality, but
So that is the difference that is often not mentioned between pan and bi. And this is why there's a bit of confusion between the definitions, is that pansexual is where gender or sex is not included in what makes you attracted to somebody. Bisexual is attraction to one or more genders, or two or more genders rather, with preference. The with preference part is important because what you're saying is that the gender or the sex of the person has some influence on why you're attracted to them or how much you're attracted to them. So a bisexual person could be attracted to any and all genders, the same way a pansexual would. But if a bisexual, for example, with me, I prefer men to women for personal reasons. Um, I would say that I am bisexual because I have preference, because their gender or sex is factored into my decision making when it comes to who I'm attracted to.
all right. So there is a more of a difference than just bisexual people, men and women, and pansexual. Everything in between as well. Okay. I
Yeah,
thought it was just as plain as that, but again, I'm not really familiar. Thank you for clarifying.
no problem.
Um, I do have to wonder. Um, like you have friends, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, great. Um, how does affect being trans in your day-to-day life? Like, um, I don't know. Do you hang out with more guys or girls? Like, are you being recognized as she or he more often? Like, is there still like how does it uh uh I'm losing my words. Uh, yeah, how
So,
does it affect you, basically?
in terms of like who I hang out with, what gender of person I hang out with, that's just like preference non-related to my gender. I've always gotten along better with men. Um, that's just for other reasons. Um, than my gender. My gender never really changed who I hang how who I hung out with. It was all other things. There are some trans people who will prefer to hang around other trans people or allies for obvious
Yeah,
reasons.
of course.
For me, it's kind of weird day to day. So you meet new people and you kind of have to vibe check first. You have to see if I tell this person my pronouns when I tell them my name, will they give me a dirty look or will they respect them? Um, and there's definitely a small amount of anxiety in a lot of first interactions with that, where a lot of times what I'll do and what my other non-binary friends will do is that they'll wait for a bit until they know someone for a while and then they'll bring it up
Oh, okay.
because it's just safer that way. Um, you get more of a chance to see if how they would take it.
How,
And
how does that often go? Do you get a lot of negative reactions when you do it, or is it mostly just calm?
it's mostly calm. Um, Luckily, there are some people where they are a little bit disgenuine, you can sense. And that's the sort of reaction where it's like, oh, but this is so confusing. Like, I just don't understand. Like, I'm just gonna use she her for you. I don't understand how you use they them. And for some people it is genuine that they just don't know. But then it's when they make it an excuse or they don't actually want to try, that it's just disappointing because what we're asking for is the same as remembering our names. If you meet a dog and you say, "Oh, he's a lovely boy," and the owner says, "Oh no, she's a girl," you immediately switch to the other gender, right? It's a
Yeah.
very easy switch to make, and it is just disappointing when people don't respect the pronouns. At the same time, when you do find people who do respect your pronouns, it's incredibly gender affirming. It's incredibly lovely to be around people who will like instead of like calling me queen, they'll call me the emperor, and stuff like that.
Okay,
It
that's a
it
good one.
is yeah. Um, it's cute little stuff like that where they would never ask for my dead name. They would never call me she her on purpose. If they do, they on accident they immediately just correct themselves and I give them a little nod and there's no like pause in conversation to pay attention to it. It's very easy to integrate respect for people's gender into your relationships with them. It becomes as big as you make it basically. um which for a trans person they should demand respect if someone's not using your pronouns. I think it's perfectly reasonable to want them to use them because it's like very difficult very difficult to ignore when somebody is not using your correct pronouns.
I
It
fully
does.
understand that. Um,
um
yeah, on a bit of the side, I recognize that calling people not by their preferred pronouns can be fucking annoying, to say the least. Funny story. I used to run a D&D campaign once online. There were just voices, and there were three guys, and there was like one very womanly sounding voice. Um, so the entire session, the person with the womanly voice was called she and her, and this and that. And at the end of the session, like he had to constantly say to people, "Hey, I'm he." So at the end of the session, I said, "Hey, could you stay here? I want to talk to you. What's going on?" Apparently, there was nothing going on with transgender, which I thought as first. Apparently, this kid was just very young and like he hadn't dropped his voice yet. So even though he wasn't transgender or something, like being cisgender and misgender as well can also be fucking awful.
yeah. And that's to go along with that topic because that's also something really interesting is that cis people can get gender dysphoria. um it comes in different forms. I think this is really interesting to find out, like even if you are like cis not in the community, is that for example women who don't feel they meet the ideal standards of femininity, like for example feeling the need to get a breast enlargement or reduction, or feeling the need to get labiaplasty, to meet like society's external demands of what a woman looks like. There's a lot of examples of dysphoria that is related to gender, even in cis people in the cis community, and the difference between the two is probably how easy it is to get treatment for them.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um,
Mm.
uh, how do you present yourself? You're non-binary, so like every clothing item goes, or
Yeah, it depends on my like masculinity or femininity for the day.
so your
I
wardrobe is twice as large as most people's.
it's pretty small. I'm a very minimalistic person. I generally just switch out the t-shirts, and I have like the same pair of pants every day. Uh,
Nice.
I'm quite androgynous in how I dress. Um, I tend to dress like very young, very modest. Um, like I will not wear anything that shows off like more than like an inch, like 2 inches above the knee type thing. Like I don't wear short skirts or short dresses.
Don't they have like dress codes for that in English schools?
They do in like secondary schools and some colleges. I'm in university, so
Oh, okay. So you're
yeah,
fine.
I can wear whatever I want, and people do wear whatever they want. And it's lovely to see. You're in a multicultural place, and people feel comfortable wearing like whatever is comfortable for them, and it's the same with me here. So I wear what I feel like. I try to dress in ways that doesn't like draw too much attention to myself, but that is more for like sexual harassment reasons than gender related. Um, Sometimes like it is gender affirming for me to, for example, whether I wear a bra or not, or what kind of bra I wear, like that sort of thing can actually make a little bit of difference in terms of um how I'm feeling with like my masculinity and femininity for the day. Um, but again, dysphoria doesn't really come to me. Um, it's more just like how do I want to present? Do I want people to treat me like as more of like one of the lads today, or do I want to be treated like a gentle petal?
uh, yeah, I can imagine that there must be a difference in there. Like if you dress more of like a guy, do you get like shit for it? Do you like is there any harassment for you being transgender? Now
Um,
I recognize you haven't like medically transitioned, so it may be a bit more easier. I don't know, like your experience.
I would say being assigned female at birth is a massive advantage for me. So I don't have to deal with things like facial hair. If I dress more boyish, it's not seen as odd. Whereas for example, my trans female friend, she will get stares like you wouldn't believe when she's out, when she's presenting femininely, because what other people often see is a man dressed as a woman.
Mm.
Whereas of me, they see a woman who is just a tomboy. That's actually like that reminds me, that's the only like close to transphobic thing that I've been told a lot is like you're just a tomboy, which I absolutely hate. Um, but anyway, yeah, no, being like assigned female at birth helps a lot. And regardless of how I dress, I still look kind of feminine because I am a very femininely built person. Um, I get a lot of compliments for my hair. If I go clubbing, I get a lot of compliments when I'm dressed androgynally. People find it really hot, actually.
Um,
Uh, s-
okay.
yeah. So I'll get a lot of girls come up to me and ruffle my hair and be like, "Oh my gosh, I love your hair, it looks so cute," and then make out with me and leave. I'll get like, I had a guy a while ago like shout towards me like, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And I didn't have the time to stop and talk. I just had to shout back neither because I was being dragged away. But those sorts of interactions where like people see that you're androgynous, they recognize that as something different or something bold, which it doesn't feel very bold to me, but that's how they recognize it. And it actually benefits me in that sense. And that's very lucky that I am in a place, this environment that is so friendly to that sort of thing.
That's great. Like there isn't. So if you're going to university, you must live in a city. I imagine that maybe help with how people react to you.
I'm not in a city actually.
Oh, you're in another city. Okay.
So this is a campus university. It's a bit out of the way. Um, It's just that it's in a university like area. Everybody lives here is between my age and 30, apart from the lecturers. So it's very much like the student body is just nice. It is like it's a more prestigious university. There's a lot of like there are some conservatives, there are some transphobes. You kind of learn the names. It's not a massive university. You kind of know who and what groups to avoid. Um, Generally, it's the sports groups that are worse with it. But like yeah, you just choose your friends basically, and I have very good friends.
I'm glad you have. Uh, I don't think I have any other questions. I think we covered most of it.
Hmm.
From sexuality to gender to harassment. I think we covered it all. I don't know if you wanna say something, if you wanna add on something on this conversation.
I would say for anybody who is interested in being an ally, it's not that hard of work. It's not super hard work. There's some intimidation, I think, where people are like, well, how do I know all these genders? Like, how am I gonna understand it all? You don't need to understand it all. It's okay. Most of the time, like, most trans people that I know, they don't need you to be an expert. You don't need to be an expert to be an activist. You don't need to be an expert to be an advocate. Being an advocate is what matters. Advocating for your friends and your family members, and listening to them, validating them, and doing whatever you can for them. We don't expect you to know every color of the rainbow. Me myself, even though I'm not straight or cis, I don't know my own flags. I don't know any flags really. I don't go to pride parades. I do some activism work, but not tons. Like, it's not what it's important, really. We'd love you to do it. We encourage it, of course. But
Of
as long
course,
as you're an advocate, that's all that matters.
just being a debate or online is enough. Uh,
I mean, you don't have to put yourself in sticky situations, but sticking up for people is nice. Only other thing that I would say is corporations are disappointing and the government's disappointing. And then that's it.
True. Uh, you told me you had to go. I wanna thank you again for coming on, especially on such a short notice. Uh, I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, well, if anything, I created the short notice, so my bad. So sorry. Thank
No
you.
worries, no worries.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, where can the people find you? I know I found you in CC, but I know if you want to
hmm,
shout out where you are.
let's see. I don't have a platform, but people can add me on Instagram or they can add me on Discord. Like, feel free to stick my Discord wherever. I'll stick my Instagram into your DMs. I don't mind if people want to hit me up.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll post it in the description.
um,
If you're fine with that.
yeah, yeah, that's 100% fine.
All right.
My name is Goose, just again as a reminder. Um, yeah, yeah, come ask me whatever. I recently was awarded finalist for the LGBT Undergraduate of the Year award in the UK. That's also interesting to talk about. So, come talk, come talk.
Will do, will do. Thank you again for coming on, and I'll see you later.
Thank you. Bye bye.